So I thought I'd jump ahead early and start actually doing a little bit of early predictions for WrestleMania 42 in Vegas, since we have now our main event essentially confirmed in CM Punk and Roman Reigns, the Z-Bros going at it in the main event of WrestleMania, Zootopia 3. That should be super dope. I was kind of against the Roman Reigns win. Kind of during the Rumble, I was kind of a big fan of possibly having Gunther kind of take the whole thing. But unfortunately, or fortunately, we actually are at least getting the Punk Roman kind of main event that people have been kind of teasing and hoping for, ever since that triple threat, ever since the War Games team up. We've been kind of waiting for this moment and tension to boil over for these two kind of alpha males. Super cool that that's probably going to be our night 2 main event. So I thought, let's kind of look at everything else in the landscape right now. Let's kind of maybe try to predict and book what the card is going to be for 42 following that main event. Kind of first, I'm gonna actually start kind of with the world heavyweight, or not the world heavyweight, the WWE title that currently Drew McIntyre has. I do not believe there will be a one-on-one match for the WWE title at WrestleMania. I believe it's going to be either I'm gonna put my hat on a fatal 4-way. I was gonna say a ladder match, but I do think it's gonna be a fatal 4-way, and I think it's gonna be a fatal 4-way between Drew, who will be the champion, Cody Rhodes, and right, and Jacob Fatu. Currently, which we kind of do see right now, we did have a couple of Elimination Chamber qualifiers that happened last week on SmackDown. I'm kind of gonna negate that. Just in the case of my own fantasy booking, I do kind of see them having Cody probably win Elimination Chamber to then challenge Drew, which to me just wouldn't be that interesting. I think maybe if what we do have is have all these men kind of in the chamber, for the title, and then some sort of shenanigans essentially happens, where people are getting into the cage and Drew's essentially able to escape with the title, that then we get a fatal 4-way of LA Knight, Jacob Fatu, Cody Rhodes, and Drew McIntyre. I say LA Knight just because I think it's due. I don't think it's due for him to have necessarily a win, but I do think LA Knight should be challenging for the world titles. LA Knight should be kind of challenging for the world titles. He's been kind of on the heels of CM Punk, and on the heels of Braun and Seth kind of when he had the belt as well, and he's been kind of chasing that world title for a minute, and now that kind of is kaput, kind of with Reigns and Punk in the picture of that, I do think that LA could maybe swing some momentum in a push for that WWE title. And I just don't think that a Drew Cody one-on-one match is a Mania level match now at this point, especially since it's been explored and the feud has been kind of done with this whole year. We're still obviously going with it, but we've seen at 3 stages of a hell match, we've seen regular one-on-one matches, we've seen DQ, what I mean? So it's like, I don't think it really would be beneficial to have Drew and Cody closing out the first night for the belt. I think they both deserve it, but I do think it would kind of dampen the WWE title scene if we just essentially saw the feud we've been watching throughout the whole year essentially happen again at Mania. So that's kind of why I see Jacob Fatu, and obviously Fatu getting involved, costing Cody his title. Obviously, I feel like he should have some sort of involvement in everything happening, and I think the allure of Jacob Fatu possibly winning the WWE title at WrestleMania is a super cool thing, and I think it brings a whole new dynamic to Cody and Drew's kind of thing, as Fatu has been out of the game for a little bit with injuries and stuff. So him coming back in as another top dog, it makes that title scene extremely interesting. And then, like I said, with LA Knight, I just think that he should be vying for a world title at Mania this year, just because once again at the Rumble he got one of the biggest pops besides probably Roman. If not, he probably might have gotten a bigger pop, so it just the fans are behind him regardless if he wins or loses, or if he's even on TV. And that to me is the biggest indicator of we should really be like putting the strap on this guy. You know, we're gonna see kind of what happens with that. But I do think the main event of night one is going to be a fatal 4-way, most likely a triple threat between Fatu, Drew, and Cody. But maybe it's gonna be a fatal 4-way between LA Knight, Fatu, Drew, and Cody for that WWE title. I think that would be super fun because then you have 2 wild cards in there that you can root for. You know, even if Drew or Cody does come out with the win here, you know, at Mania, you get Fatu and LA Knight get experience in being in a championship match at the main event of WrestleMania, which then they can have under their belt, which is another notch to, you know, kind of cement their top guy statuses. The WWE Women's title, it's definitely going to be probably Jade Cargill versus either Tiffany Stratton or Jordynne Grace. Or we're probably going to get a triple threat between the 3 of them, just because I think it'd be a super fun match, and it's like, just who is the top alpha, who's the top new bad bitch in the division, you know what I mean? And, you know, Jade's character being basically that take no BS character from AEW back, Jordynne Grace on a super the best she's ever looked and on a crazy run, and then obviously Tiffany off the heels of coming back to a hot crowd at the Rumble, you know, fresh off of, you know, injury and off of that almost year-long championship run that Jade ended. We definitely can see a run back of Jade and Tiff, but I do think adding Jordynne Grace to the mix fires things up and gives you a lot of prospects for that division. So I do think it's going to be a triple threat between Jade, Jordynne Grace, and Tiffany Stratton. Tiffy time. And then for the women's world title, this is where I do think it gets kind of interesting, because Liv winning and kind of making her point to go after that title with Stephanie McMahon holding it is pretty interesting. The match itself, I think, is okay, you know, but I think it's the best we kind of have right now with the women's world title, really due to everyone being in the tag division. You're like, you know, and in a funny segment they had on SmackDown, we know that Liv ain't gonna be challenging Jade, you know what I mean? Because that's just gonna be a dog walk, unfortunately. Super interesting, but I do think Stephanie and Liv will be fighting for that title. Maybe we get a Raquel not face turn, but turn on Liv. I can see Liv. I don't think Liv will ever be a face in the terms of like babyface actions. She might be a babyface with the crowd, but I don't think she would ever. Her character doesn't lend itself to be a face. Same thing with Raquel. So maybe what will happen is we have some just kind of breakdowns or communication breakdowns within the Judgment Day that lead to Stephanie still retaining. I guess they could have Liv winning with her cheating ways, and then they can kind of extend Stephanie chasing the title as well into Backlash, etc., for the rest of the calendar year. So they kind of have a lot of options they can kind of go with Stephanie and Liv as a match. And that's still also a marquee match. You have both. These are both super over women, top of the card women. So it's kind of a natural world title match. And you know, Liv winning the Rumble, you know, I think everyone kind of pointed to that women's world title as being hers. So we'll kind of see what happens with that. You know, I do think it's going to be Liv and Stephanie there. If I'm going to look at now kind of the mid-card titles, we'll do the women's first. For the women's US title, I kind of do see maybe some sort of, I don't know if the title will be defended at Mania, but if we were going to do a match, I kind of do see another multi-woman match. Kind of the feuds that have been happening around the US title have kind of involved Chelsea Green and Julia mostly, but we could kind of add Zelina Vega into the mix if we wanted to have her, you know, in contention for the US title. But if I were to book it accurately and predict it, I kind of just see Julia kind of dropping it to maybe Chelsea at Mania, which sounds kind of lame, but I do think there's been a lot of fanfare for Chelsea Green, you know, recently, and well, not even recently, just ever since she's been in WWE, because she's such a great just entertainer, you know, and I think that, you know, kind of a win at Mania with the belt would really cement her as like a mainstay. I think also would be kind of a reward for her for kind of putting that US division on her back in terms of like who is garnering reception in an actual response, and trying to make take every inch and make it a mile. I feel like Chelsea Green has been the biggest example of that. So I kind of do see Chelsea and Julia probably going at it one more time at Mania. And if it's not a one-on-one match, I kind of could see another fatal four-way, but it's going to be Kiana James and Alba Fire essentially in the match as well, vying for the US title, because despite being the underlings, they might kind of want a shot at the gold too. And I think it would be extremely fun, especially since they've been kind of pushing Kiara James a lot more, because she obviously has a lot to give, and she can be kind of her own force, to be honest. Maybe they give Kiana the US belt at Mania in a surprise pop. Maybe she pins Julia, and then you have Julia and Kiana James kind of feuding, into Backlash, in the beginning of the calendar year, kind of, really, increasing the chase for that U.S. title. So now Julia wants to get back at Kiana, who she thought was her friend, for example. So I kind of do see either it's going to be, Chelsea versus Julia again, or a fatal four-way with Kiana James, Alba Fire, and Chelsea Green. Yeah, I'm gonna say actually though it's gonna be Julia and Chelsea probably again for the US title, which I get. It's just because they don't really seem to know what to do with that title. They did kind of have Alexa face off. Was it Alexa? I think it was Alexa who faced off against Julia on a random SmackDown. Moving to the women's Intercontinental title, if we're gonna be on that, I do also think, I would prefer Natalya and Maxine to have a one-on-one match at Mania. I think that spotlight is deservedly, big enough for PLE, but I can also see a triple threat between her, Becky, and Natalya to kind of give that more star power. I think that's probably the line they're going to go down. And I do kind of see, hopefully, maybe Natalya, like, essentially disaligning herself with both Becky and Maxine to do her own thing and kind of take the belt in kind of a grand heist thing where she kind of coerced both these women into a triple threat match at Mania. I would love that type of story kind of coming together if possible between Natty, Maxine, and Becky Lynch. I think that would be super fun. So I do kind of see a triple threat happening between those three for Mania. It's crazy too, because the US belt needs that love that they've been giving to the Intercontinental belt on Raw, because man, like, from Lyra to Becky to Maxine right now, they've done an excellent job of making the title feel important and giving it feuds and stories built around that can even happen and function outside of the title. Mainly Natty and Maxine's kind of mentorship, apprentice kind of role that's happening right now. That while the IC title is the goal there, that's a story that can be told without it as well, which is a super big plus. So I do see a triple threat between Natty, Becky, and Maxine Dupree happening at Mania. So that's the women's mid-card titles. If I were going to go to, I guess, the tag titles for the women, I do see it being I think the ladder match, or the big multi-person match this year, is going to be the women's tag match for the tag titles. I kind of have a feeling they want to kind of do a Hardy TLC level kind of response and stuff for everything, and or like level match essentially, and I think that would be super cool. You have some of the best in the tag division right now, like, period. So if we do get that multi-ladder match between Rio, and Lash Legend and Nia, and Lyra and Bailey, and Alexa and Charlotte, and the Kabuki Warriors, right? And now the Bella Twins. That, to me, I know that they probably will be doing a one-on-one match between the Bella Twins and Rio, most likely, but I kind of do see a multi-man ladder match being the best way to showcase this crazy women's division, and to really cap it off by having a great match with everybody involved that is reminiscent of some of the best tag teams like ever of all time, in the Hardys, Dudleys, and the Christian and Edge doing their thing back in the day with TLC. So I think it would be super cool to have like a TLC / ladder match for the women's tag titles involving all the women's tag teams kind of vying for it right now. I don't know who would win that. I personally I wouldn't have the Bellas win that, right? But I think I would have the Kabuki Warriors win, because to me, or no, I would have Nia Jax and Lash Legend probably come home with the W there, just because since Lash has now been coming on the scene and is essentially being propped up as one of the next big women in the division, I do think her and Nia just going on a run, going on a tear after maybe getting the huge win at WrestleMania, her first WrestleMania being a championship win, I think would be huge for Lash Legend. And you have another kind of notch in the belt of Nia Jax that you can kind of put in there for her as well. So I do think it's going to be a multi-woman tag match that happens at Mania. Hopefully a ladder match too. That'd be super fun. So with the women's stuff kind of all out of the way, I kind of want to, I guess, dive into the men's mid card after looking at the WWE title. So for the men's Intercontinental title that Dom's had for a while, and since he's been kind of Mr. AAA, it's kind of hard to discuss what exactly and what he will be doing with the title. Last year we had that fatal 4-way where he eventually got one over Finn essentially in that match to become IC champion. I think what we need to kind of do is kind of go deep into that. I think Finn right now vying for the world title will eventually fail and then essentially turn to Dominic and go after his IC title. And I think that a match between both Finn and Dominic at Mania would most likely not only steal the show, but be a great showcase for both of them to kind of have a blow-off feud that's been teased for the better part of like a year and a half, almost 2 years now. And I think, Finn and Dom having a fight for that IC title, maybe even make it a triple threat with JD, I think would be a perfect way to kind of cap off the tension and everything that's happening between the Judgment Day. Maybe they start vying for each other's power, right? Especially on that men's side. For the men's US title with Melo, I do think it's going to be an open challenge. I think this I'd have to come back to, because kind of the landscape does really affect who his challenger would be. And usually, with Joe Hendry winning the NXT title very recently, I don't know if it would necessarily be him, but I'm going to put that prediction down that he will actually answer Melo's open challenge as the NXT champion at WrestleMania. Just like last year's Mania, I think it was, right? You had that surprise pop for Joe Hendry, and this was before he was even inundated with the NXT audience really fully, when we were first starting to do that TNA integration. And now him being an NXT roster member and NXT champion and stuff, I think it would be super awesome to have Joe Hendry return to WrestleMania in an open challenge for Melo, where he might not in my opinion, he might beat Melo, right, if I was the booker, but I don't think that would probably destroy Melo's credibility. So I'd probably have either a hard fought match, and then something that kind of involves either whoever Melo is feuding with at the time, which most likely will be like Miz or something, so that we can kind of have that Miz triangle between him, Joe Hendry, and Melo, and I think that would be kind of a fun mid-card feud to kind of pull into Backlash and into the rest of the year after, a Mania match where Miz tries to involve himself after being jealous about Melo's success and also, hating Joe Hendry. So I do think Joe Hendry would answer Melo's US Open challenge at Mania, and I think that would be super fun to see. Besides him, it could be also Leon Slater, but I do see it being Joe Hendry for the more casual pop, compared to a Leon Slater. So that's what I'm going to say for the US title. And for the men's, both men's tag titles, I guess the Usos. Trying to really think, because there's no, I guess the Usos are going to run it back with the New Day, because I don't know who else on the roster I would even care to see at Mania. Last year we had the New Day and Viking Raiders, in which their match really, good for the New Day, because the New Days and War Raiders are both great teams, and the match wasn't bad. It was a great match. But that TLC match that happened, right, for the SmackDown belts that happened after, was way more deserving to be on that Mania card, right? But we digress. For the Raw, I guess, tag titles, I do see kind of the New Day and the Usos as, I don't know any other team besides maybe I guess Otis and Tozawa, if they do a proper build, I can kind of see Otis and Tozawa toppling the Usos at Mania. That sounds crazy, I get it, but they kind of do need to make some more tag teams and breathe legitimacy into that tag division. So like, you know, where are we going? You know, we need some sort of new teams. I don't really think another New Day Uso kind of hit is gonna do anything for the tag division. I think it does add on to the legacy of both the Usos and the New Day, and maybe it will remind everybody kind of, you know, of their tag team prowess, and maybe they even start a proper feud going into Backlash and stuff. So that could be kind of the silver lining with having New Day and the Usos kind of face off at Mania. And then kind of moving to the WWE tag titles, the SmackDown titles. It seems like they're just kind of forever in the vortex of Uncle Howdy and the Wyatt Six and the MFTs. So I'm probably going to say it's going to be a gimmick match at Mania. You'll have, you know, MFTs versus the Wyatt Six in a crazy, like, probably spooky house something match where there's Mountain Dew neon stuff everywhere or whatever. I don't really see, unless they do have Montez and you know, the Street Profits come back, I guess maybe we can see the Street Profits maybe facing against a heel MFT team. But I do think they're going to extend the Wyatt Six stuff and the MFT stuff, just because those are both the only teams that draw any heat or reaction on SmackDown. Fraxium is a great team to watch, but they have really no charisma there, unfortunately. But they are extremely talented and fun to watch in the ring. But all of their kind of segments have been kind of flat for me, unfortunately, so I don't really see them kind of picking up any momentum going into Mania. So I kind of just see the Wyatt Six and MFT kind of continuing their thing and maybe ending it there at Mania with some crazy, like, spectacle of a match, you know. So I think that's what's gonna happen. We're gonna have some crazy gimmick match between MFTs and the Wyatt Six for those belts. Any special matches? I do think Gunther is going to retire Brock. I mean, if I was booking it, Gunther should retire Brock. Brock and Gunther should happen at Mania. Brock should come up at some point, since Gunther's been talking trash about all of Brock's contemporaries. Brock should show up and be like, hey boy, you know, like, I see you talking crap about everybody else, like, you got to go through me. And then Gunther, in his insane mind, is like, all right, Brock, I'm a god, you know what, put your career on the line. You think you're such hot stuff. So I kind of want to see that happen. I think that would be super awesome. Cap off the career killer gimmick with retiring Lesnar, man. That would be crazy. You already have AJ Styles, John Cena, Goldberg, all basically within a single calendar year. If you were able to close out that calendar year with retiring Lesnar, man, we have a mega heel on our hands. We have a mega monster final boss on our hands, no pun intended, you know. We'll see what happens with that. That's kind of the one special match I think will happen, and I'm pining for it, you know. I think, you know, they've been building Lesnar so that someone can kind of come by and take him off his feet, you know. And I think that's why they're doing that, because there's no real reason to build him up right now when there's not going to be an upside on him, you know, since he's on the way out, almost 50, right? I'd assume there's a plan in place for him to put somebody over with the aura that he's kind of been gaining back kind of with his return. So I do see Gunther kind of retiring Brock at Mania, and that could even be a main event. Overall, kind of okay Mania. I think if there was more, the lack of a central storyline, and the lack, especially with the Vision, because obviously they're going to be doing something at Mania, but I don't really, no pun intended, have a vision for them, you know, right now, especially when kind of, you know, Rumble was kaput, and you know, I guess we'll kind of see what happens with Chamber, but for now I don't really see a place for the Vision on the card unless they get involved with shenanigans in one of the main events, you know. But well, again, I guess see with the Masked Man and stuff, but that is kind of my early WrestleMania 42 card before Elimination Chamber that I'm putting out there. Let me know what you guys kind of think about it all. Kind of a longer video, this one, but I just kind of wanted to ramble and kind of do some predictive booking to see kind of where things could land and see what you guys think about that. So let me know what you guys think, and if WrestleMania 42 Vegas is going to be dope. You know, I'm hoping that we get a card similar to this, or, you know, a lot better, you know. So we'll see.